I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're delighted to introduce you to a very talented author. His name is Don Eggspuehler, and he has written a wonderful book. It's going to take you back to the good old days. This book is called Life Lessons Learned in Grade School. It's a delightful collection of over 30 stories split into two parts covering kindergarten through sixth grade, capturing the essence of childhood and the character building moments therein. The author takes us back to the innocence and humor of youth through the adventures of Donny, a young boy learning life's lessons from wearing a cowboy outfit. I think I'm guilty as charged as well, to school, to exploring caves and all that other great stuff, and understanding the impact of his actions. These tales resonate with all readers, young and old. You'll just love it. It'll remind you of what you did a couple of years ago, or maybe even a couple of decades ago, or even many decades ago. But those are the lessons that stick with us for life. Don, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you for having me, Logan. It's a real pleasure.
This must have been a great memory lane for you to go back to your childhood. I'm assuming most of this is based on your own adventures told through the character of Donny, right?
Oh yeah, and I was lucky. I had a grandfather who told me lots of stories about his generations and so forth. So I kind of picked up storytelling from him and my father, obviously. But yeah, it was just going back in time, and I was hoping to impart a little bit of wisdom to some younger generations today from my mistakes. And I made a lot of mistakes. So, you
That's all
know,
part of it.
it
My
is
misspent youth, it's all part of it, right?
right.
Yeah. And the
So,
storytelling is a lost tradition. I remember sitting in front of my house. I'd sit on the milk box and my dad would sit in his chair and he would just tell us stories about the stars and the fairies and the purple people eaters and all this stuff. So storytelling is a great art. So you're blessed your grandfather and your dad had that tradition with you. In this book, do you have a favorite story?
oh gosh, there are lots of them.
Yeah.
Some of them are from really just making stupid decisions, and I
Yeah.
didn't think things through as a kid, and I paid the consequences. I got in trouble,
Yeah.
and I just had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. And the
Exactly.
reason I wrote the book is I thought by relaying these stories to younger people, they could learn from my mistakes. And it's uh, it's been a real joy to go back. Actually, I found uh, the real market for the book so far has been the baby boomers, my
Mm.
age. People that
Yeah.
haven't thought about their childhood for 50, 60 years, and
Yeah.
this brings back memories that they had. And I was hoping that even if they read it and had some good laughs, that they would
Right.
share it with their grandchildren so that, that helped, and maybe even share their own stories along with it that were similar, because it will trigger a lot of new memories for people that
Absolutely.
from that time.
Absolutely. I'm on a Facebook group with my grammar school, and it really brings me back when a name creeps up. I'm like, Larry, yeah, I remember him. He's the
Yeah.
kid who did this or did that. And I think all we had to do back in those days was mischief. There wasn't many TV channels. Our TV was only black and white. We didn't have a phone like this that had, a lot of preoccupying things on it. Tell me, just, I know you don't have to pick your favorite, but give me an example of one of your stories and a mistake you made that folks could learn from.
Well, um, right off the bat, I uh, was 5 years old and going into the dime store and
Mhm.
wanted to ride the horsey in the dime store, and got up on it, and it lasted for just a couple seconds, it seemed like to me. And I was very upset by that. So I started causing a ruckus in the store, and my mom was kind of embarrassed by it all. And she said, Donnie, stop this nonsense or I'm gonna have to slap you. And when she did, I wouldn't listen to her. I just was ranting, and when she went to just slap me, I turned my face into it, and it caught me right on the nose.
Wow.
and my nose started to bleed, and I
Oh.
started screaming, "Now look what you've done!" She ushered me out real quick out of the store and stopped the bleeding with a Kleenex, obviously. But
Right.
it was just one of those things that later on I understood why she was so upset with me, because I was
Right.
such a scene at the store for no good reason, really.
Yeah.
But it's not just messing up like that. I just living through life back then. We all learn lessons too. And
Hmm.
one of my favorite stories is my first trip to the dentist. This was when I was 5 years old, and I needed a filling, and they didn't have Novocaine back then.
Right.
So that was an hour of just sheer torture for me to go
Mm.
through. But I learned that I sure wanted to start brushing my teeth all the time, not have to go to the
Exactly.
dentist.
Exactly. I
It
thought it
was
was kind of
like,
cool back in the day to collect a lot of silver in your teeth. Little did I
oh
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So,
Your 5 and 10 story, your dime story really brings me back. I always wanted like one of those flavored ices at the 5 and 10, and my
uh-huh.
mother would never let me get one. She'd say they were junk, they're no good for you, you can't have it. One day, I see her dressed in her black skirt having one of those ice cones. And I grab her skirt and I'm like, Mom, that's no fair. That's no fair. And I'm tugging at her skirt. And I look up from her skirt to the cone to her face, and I realize that's not my mother. So we all have our embarrassing moments from childhood that we recall, and I guess a lot happened at the dime store because that was the hub back then, right?
Oh yeah, no
Yeah.
question.
Tell me what it was like for you writing this book. A lot of fun?
It was. Writing has always been that way for me, and I've written a couple other books, but it's it really relaxes me, and I have an easy time putting my thoughts down on paper, which most people don't have that.
Yeah.
So it was very relaxing and nostalgic for me, and I found as other friends and family have read it, it again it just resonates with them, and they can relate to it. So.
Exactly. Well,
Uh,
like you brought back my dime store story. Everybody's got a kind of a commonality of growing up, you know. Is that you, by the way, on the cover in the
it
cowboy
is.
outfit?
Yeah, it sure is.
There
I
we
wore my
go.
cowboy outfit every day to school during kindergarten, every day, because
That's
my
awesome.
teacher said I looked good in this cowboy outfit. And of course, the Lone Ranger was my hero back then.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I was a George Reeves Superman guy. And as soon as Halloween season would come, she'd buy me a costume and I would wear it every day. I didn't wear it to school, but I wore it every day. And then she'd buy me another one closer to Halloween because it was falling apart by the time Halloween finally rolled around. Hey, Don, tell me about some of the other books you've written that you've published.
Well, the first book I wrote was about my wife, who I'd been married to for 22 years, and she got brain cancer.
Hmm.
And she went through an awful lot that last year, but she passed away at age 46,
Oh,
which
God.
way too early.
Yeah.
But I went through a lot of the doctor's reports and other information we had when she was going through this struggle. And I thought
Hmm.
I'd really like to preserve her memory for my kids and
Yeah.
their kids and so forth. So I wrote a book called Star Benchwarmers, and I got a copy of it right here.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was really not just the sad times. So I went back to when we met and got married and had children, and so I interspersed the stories with happy stories, and
Hmm.
then her struggle.
Right.
And again, it turned out my kids loved it. I gave it to
Yeah.
them as a Christmas present, and
Yeah.
then other people started asking me about it, and I didn't really promote it, but I still uh, sold a lot of copies to
Great.
friends and family in my hometown and so forth.
Wonderful. Well, it's wonderful you're able to preserve her memory and not just focusing on how she died, but focusing on how she lived, which
Yeah.
is a really nice tribute as well. Any other books you've published that you'd like to talk about today?
Yes, I wrote a historical fiction about my hometown, Iowa Falls, Iowa. And
Hmm.
it was four generations from the Civil War and the early settlers all the way through the 1800s and 1900s. And it skipped a lot of my grandfather's stories, and it went back and forth between the settlers and more modern times. and even a few of my early stories as a child in the 50s. And
Mm.
that's what kind of got me started. I had a lot of people say, "Oh, I love the stories about when you were a kid."
Yeah.
History was fine. I liked learning the history, but I loved the stories about you being a kid. And so I started thinking about more of those stories and have expanded it. And actually, this is the first of four books that I'm
Wow.
in a four-book series. Two are grade school, one for junior high, and one for high school. Life lessons learned in junior high. So anyway, that one was called Teachings from Pop, and that's what we called my grandfather was Pop. So it's
Wonderful.
kind of a tribute to him and how he passed along a lot of those stories to me when I was just a little guy. And again, he was retired at the time, and he had the time to spend with me, which
Hmm.
most parents don't have time. They're so busy juggling their careers and bringing up the kids and school and finances. And he had all the time in the world, and he loved for me to be curious. So I
Mm.
asked him questions all the time, and he'd answer them.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky to have a mentor like that that really cared about me. And hopefully, this will be kind of the same thing for a lot of today's kids.
Absolutely. Iowa is a great state. I drove across country a couple of years ago with my wife, and we happened to spend a lot of time in Iowa. We went to the bridges of Madison County and saw all of those.
Yeah,
And then we saw Winterset, I think is the name of the town, which is John Wayne's hometown. Have you ever been there?
right.
Yeah, it's just this is amazing. Big statue of, 6'4" John Wayne in the middle of town, a museum, a theater that still plays his movies. It was really like stepping back in time. When you talk about life lessons learned, walking down that main street in Winterset really, put me back in time because that's what my town was like.
Right. And Iowa Falls was very similar. It was a town of 5,000 people, still is a town of
Yeah,
about 5,000. And so you got to know everybody. I went through school with the same kids all the way from kindergarten through high school. And so
right.
it's really wonderful to get to know them and their families and brothers and sisters. Everybody knew everybody, and there was no crime. So we
Yep.
really lived in a different time capsule there than current uh, you know
Yeah,
nation.
yeah. There certainly wasn't the crazy crime that we have today.
Not at all.
There certainly was a greater sense of community. It was built around a downtown, which, these downtowns are deteriorating nowadays because everybody is ordering boxes on Amazon instead of using their legs to walk around the little town square.
Exactly.
So it's a shame what's happened. We ought to keep Iowa a secret, though. We shouldn't tell people it's a beautiful place because it still seems to be thriving and it does still seem like a throwback, that's for sure. You
It's
working
on
on,
about 6 feet of snow right now.
oh,
The
I'm
whole
sure,
area.
exactly, which is probably why you're
A lot
glad
of
in
my stories
Texas.
take place in the winter also, because we had a lot of fun as kids in the winter,
Yeah.
sledding and getting into all kinds of mischief. So
Exactly, exactly. Well, those are, losing the power, sledding, because you found an old cardboard box and use that as a sled or a garbage can cover or whatever it was. That's what makes a memorable childhood, you know?
yeah,
I remember there was a big snowstorm in front of my house and there was a big puddle of water and I was swimming in it in the middle of winter. Till my mom came along and said, "Get the heck out of there. That's the sewer." The sewer had backed up, but oh well, you know,
yeah.
that's one of the life lessons I've learned. When you find running water in a snowstorm, it might be a backed up sewer. So, so life lessons is a part of a four-book series you were saying?
Yeah. Two again, cover kindergarten through sixth grade, uh,
Mhm.
and then junior high and high school. So I really
Wonderful.
changed. It was over those years. The innocence of being a 5-year-old kind of changes when you're in junior high and you're faced with all different kinds of problems. And same
Yeah,
with high school. And I
exactly.
don't think we were faced with near as many challenges as kids today are with
Right.
video. I mean, your phones and the internet and all this stuff that they have going on, and peer pressure from things like Facebook and so forth. So we didn't have those distractions. We had to use our imaginations. And
Exactly. Exactly. Also, if you'd lived in this, if you've been a 5-year-old now, your little temper tantrum at Woolworths, where you had the bloody nose and all that stuff would be a viral video online.
Probably would be.
So not only would you remember it, all of the world would remember it as well. Out of control child screams at mom, mom bats him, and mom would be arrested, and we live in a crazy time. Well, Don Eggspuehler has taken some time and has crafted a wonderful book. It is called Life Lessons Learned in Grade School. It's a delightful collection, more than 30 stories. It's split into two parts covering kindergarten through sixth grades, and it captures the essence of growing up and all of the life lessons we learn, all of the character building moments we experience. You will love this book, and Don has a bunch of books. I'm sure you would love those as well. Don, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
You bet. I sure appreciate your taking the time, Lo.
Oh, my pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.